Live from St. Petersburg at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. I'm Tian Wei, and World Insight with Tian Wei is bringing to you this special live edition of our program. The forum has come into its second day. Some of the most important agenda have already been achieved. How to assess the result of the forum, and also how should we understand the complicated geopolitics after all the discussions at the forum. I'm joined here in our live studio at St. Petersburg by three gentlemen. First of all, Jim Rogers in the middle, world-renowned investor, and he's now Singapore-based. Welcome to our program. Meanwhile, joining us, Vladamir Yakunin, who is the former Russian Railways CEO and founder of the international think tank Dialogue of Civilizations. Welcome as well. Last but certainly not least, Mr. Sitao, chief economist and partner of Deloitte China. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. What should be the takeaway? Mr. Rogers, shall I begin with you? It's great to see you again for this year.
Well, I just bought Russian government bonds. I want to buy more because I can see Russia's getting better. But the biggest item of interest is Donald Trump. Everybody wants to talk about Donald Trump.
Really? Is that also your interest, Mr. Yakunin, Donald Trump
Not
only?
from the plenary, because during the plenary, Mr. Putin concentrated on internal aspects of further development of Russian economy, as you of course remember, and he was talking about better climate, how to protect the interest of investors. Politics came through the questions of the journalists.
Aren't they the most important questions though? The politics?
No, I suppose, during the forum, it is not the most impressive and most interesting. But of course, Mr. Trump was all over the air, in the air, and of course, we were talking about, many other aspects.
Except Mr. Trump, a lot of international agreements are also in the minds of people here. We just understand, Mr. Rogers, before we go to the Chinese panelists, the U.S. Formally withdraw itself from the Paris Climate Change Accord. What would that mean? Some say it's lack of moral leadership from now on.
Well, that's what the critics say. The people who support Mr. Trump.
What about you?
So the people who support Mr. Trump thinks it's brilliant.
Are you?
I don't support Mr. Trump. No, I don't think Mr. Trump is brilliant. I did not vote for Mr. Trump. I did not vote for Hillary Clinton either.
Okay, that's a good position. But what is your view of this political change? It seems have some impact.
Well, the scientific studies I have seen, there's a lot of debate. Many say there is no global warming caused by emissions. Others say there is. I don't know. I'm just as happy to be out of it as to be in it.
All right. If Mr. Rogers does not want to jump in on that critical issue, let Mr. Xu do that job as well. You're coming from China, and the Chinese government has reaffirmed its commitment to the Paris Accord after the U.S. made the decision. So what is likely to be? Is it going to be a game changer? Some wonder.
I'm not sure whether game changer, but China is doing the right thing because at this point you need some leadership. At the same time, I think pollution in China is something which is more than irritating. So you have a growing middle class, the expectations are rising very fast. I think China needs to do this. And you don't want to be stuck with this legacy issue, equity, fairness, so on and so forth. So I think China is doing the right thing.
One of the great opportunities of our time is pollution cleanup in China.
Yeah.
If you can clean up China, you're going to make a fortune. And if you
It is the opportunity over there, golden and green opportunity. But what about Mr. Yakunin? I mean, President Putin at the plenary session today, he talked about, well, if the U.S. is not part of the agreement is not necessarily going to work. He said that as a concept. Do you agree?
Listen, to be more precise, he pointed out that it is not actually agreement, that is frame for further, agreements. Yeah. And he particularly said that, of course, if, United States withdraw from it, it will not help, but it is not the ruining of the entire idea. As far as, whether the climate is warming up or it is not, listen, sitting here in St. Petersburg in June, when the temperature outside is temperature of a freezer, with your room, I don't, that particularly sure about it.
In fact, President Putin just a few days ago said specifically that the ice in the Arctic is melting, and that is going to be advantageous for Russia, which is looking for land and soil of its own.
But there is another point of view, because warming up and melting of the ice can bring the level of the ocean up. And when I was in New York City, I saw some drastical pictures when entire Manhattan is covered with the water. So there is some aspects to be concerned. The cause, that is the most essential question. What is the cause of the warming up? Because now that the temperature is rising.
That's right. We could have this debate for days and months and years. That's exactly what we had in our world. But Mr. Xu, so what would all of this mean, both business opportunity-wise and also politics as well?
I think business opportunity, I completely with Mr. Rogers. I do think this could turn into a booming industry. I think that should also give China an excuse, a legitimate excuse to slow down economic growth. It's important for China to do that. Geopolitical risk, unfortunately, that was actually a good platform for China and the United States to work together. So that's a shame.
It gives China a great platform now, because they can say to the world, we're cleaning up and America's not. So it just makes China's position in the world even stronger. America has abandoned the Pacific. They left the TPP. So China's star is rising.
Really? Is that the issue of reality and also morality?
Yeah, China's position clearly is being enhanced. I think China has shown a lot of commitment in terms of trade liberalization. That would also give China, I think, a pressure for opening up the domestic economy. So I think China is on the right track.
But it is easy for China to say we want to clean up the world, because China's filthy. They got to clean up. As I said, there are great opportunities.
China cleaning up its own land and its own air is contributing to the great emission cut and controls of the whole world. Having said that, though, there are other layers of this forum, even though it is about economic issues. But geopolitics has always been having an impact. And Mr. Yakunin, President Putin at the plenary session talking about the role of NATO, he said this is mainly should be about anti-terrorism, and as a result of that, he will welcome that. Of course, Mr. Rogers, that was what President Trump was proposing during the NATO summit just held a bit earlier. So do you think with these two leaders trying to work out a common ground, will that be the common ground for the others? Mr. Yakunin.
Listen, I am positive, and I completely agree with the position of Mr. Putin. By the way, that was not in his speech, that was in the answering of the questions, that, if NATO was to protect Western world from Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union, and if it is not both of them now in existence, then why it is not concentrating on the fighting terrorism and promoting the peace in different places. But as far as Russian and American leaders are concerned, they are not the sovereigns of the world. It is not possible that they sit together, they agreed. It should be a common agreement what the leaders should do. G20 is coming, by the way.
G20 is coming, and there is also the BRICS summit. Of course, China, Russia, India, South Africa, and also Brazil gonna join together. Mr. Rogers, President Putin also at the plenary session talking about willing to work on that platform together with the Indian Prime Minister. But to what extent will that come true?
Well, the world needs something to compete with the U.S. The U.S. dollar needs something to compete with the U.S. dollar. It needs something to compete with the World Bank, and China and Russia and India are saying, let's do it. Let's come up with it. We have enough people. They have 3 billion people and a lot of money. And so they're coming up with things which are not good for America. America's dominated all of these things, and now America's going to have competition.
You seem to be very open-minded about that. Mr. Xu?
Yeah,
is that
I think this,
yes.
No, well, these 3 countries, nothing wrong with the competition, right? You can compete, you can collaborate at the same time. But these 3 countries, they can all learn from each other. For example, today, Prime Minister Modi said you need maximum governors, minimize government, and you need to give red carpet to business people. I think that's a very powerful message. I think perhaps China could also take a page from what is happening in India.
The hustling and bustling of the conference, you can even hear through your ears right now, it seems that the conference is getting ever more active. Having said that though, will the cooperation as a result of this conference getting ever more active? Mr. Yakunin, I know you've been working on infrastructure and also railway, of course. The Belt and Road Initiative coming from China, the Eurasian Economic Corridor coming from Russia. People are debating about this. Is this going to be complementary or competition? This is another question people have been talking for a long time.
Listen, politically, the question got the answer during visit of President Xi Jinping in February 2014. In their conversation with Mr. Putin, Mr. Xi Jinping particularly showed that this One Belt, One Road initiative is not competitive to, the initiatives of Russia. And that was kind of suggestion to cooperate. That is my particular opinion, that there are fields for competition, of course, but there is one field in which we should not compete, we should cooperate. That is the future of our further generations.
Wait, this is going to make a lot of people rich. A lot of people in China rich and a lot of people in Russia rich. If you're at the right place, when the railroad went across America, Denver, Colorado, you've heard of Denver. Denver didn't exist till the railroad came, and now it's a very bustling and rich city.
Right.
So this is going to help a lot of people. It's going to harm some people, but it's going to help people too.
Right, but
it's not about
it's getting reached the point.
No, it's actually not about railroad. It's even not about some countries. I think my understanding of One Belt, One Road is China's reinforced commitment for opening up. It's beyond the 63 countries. For example, Australia could be part of One Belt, One Road. Brazil could be part of One Road. US companies could be involved in Central Asia. So it's really not about some physical connection between two countries in this part of the world. I think it's beyond that.
All of the three of you.
It is, of course, about the connectivity, of course, for sure. But I completely agree with you. This is not about railways or automobile railroads. But that is about creation of complex infrastructure. Infrastructure not only two. This is also water supply, this is energy supply, that is infrastructure of knowledge, that is infrastructure of culture. And in this meaning, I completely agree with you. This is kind of opening up to the world.
Okay, yeah.
This is the founder of international civilization talking about here.
Absolutely.
Having said all of this, I mean, gentlemen, seriously speaking, there are a lot of things flying around these days. So many possibilities, whether it's about geopolitics or it's about economic and business opportunities. Mr. Rogers, if I could borrow some of your wisdom, what are we embracing right now? A search of ideas or a search of leadership? Are they going to come together?
Well, we desperately need leadership. There are very few people in the world who understand the world economy. The Chinese do. I mean, I wish the Chinese government was running the American government because they are much better. The Chinese.
That's why you're based in Singapore, I guess.
Well, no, the Chinese have done a much better job over the past 30 years than America or Britain or anybody else. I mean, the facts are.
You're not just
simple.
saying that because we're CGTN.
No. The facts are very simple. Whether I say it or not, the facts are very simple. China's been the most successful country in the world in the last 30 years. In the last 30 years, America's become the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. We were a creditor nation 30 years ago, and now we have gigantic. These are simple facts. So I'm just saying that other than in China, there's not much leadership around the world these days.
Mr. Yakunin?
Listen, we just saw the leader,
Mr. Putin, I know, Mr. Putin, I know. Here we are in St.
But we are not
Petersburg.
talking about only, one or two leaders. I completely agree with you, because if we are talking about business, where the business starts, democracy in terms of governance stops. Because, I don't believe big business enterprises being, governed with, meetings every day for 4 hours, and trying to find,
All right, so your point is?
My point is, it is in terms of geopolitics, of course, this is democratic process. In terms of concrete projects, it should be very straightforward, new models, and very strong leadership.
Ideas, leadership, how does that work?
Well, ideal leadership is really about, in my opinion, looking at things from other parties' perspective, having empathy. As a Chinese, I don't want to getting carried away. There's still a long way to go for China to become a truly affluent society. So I think China is taking this initiative one by one road, but at the same time, China needs collaboration from other countries, needs involvement of business sector.
Will geopolitics delay all of this process, Mr. Chu?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers, are you as pessimistic as Mr. Chu?
No, I'm saying that economics is going to be the factor, the biggest factor. It always has been and always will be. But sometime in the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to have serious economic problems in the world, and that's going to change a lot of thinking by a lot of people.
Mr. Yakunin.
It's already started. You know, I just came from T20 from Berlin, and they were talking about alternative models of economic development. And that is a clear sign that what we are talking here about necessity to change is absolutely already here.
Necessity to change, but to what direction, of course? That's the most important thing, Mr. Rogers.
The one that's going to come up is we're all going to try to figure out how we're going to survive, because we're going to have the worst economic times in my lifetime, not your lifetime, in my life. So we're all going to try to figure out how to survive, and when that happens, when the world is tested, politicians come up with some of the craziest, most ludicrous ideas, and so be careful. Be worried and be careful.
Be worried and be careful, but also still with some degrees of hope, I guess, Mr. Xu.
Oh, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think for China and India, there's still a lot of room for growth. But at the same time, we must be used to the slower growth rate in future.
Of course, the BRICS summit is coming up later in China, in the city of Xiamen.
Yeah.
So people are thinking, how will these very different economies at different development stages be able to come together? Will they be able to bound? Will politics divide them or further bring them together? That is the ultimate question. And many are trying to ask that question, Mr. Rogers, at this year's summit here in St. Petersburg.
BRICS is not a very viable concept. It was something a guy who'd never been to any of them looked at a map and said, these are big countries. I wouldn't pay too much attention to BRICS. Figure out the money. In America, we have an expression, follow the money. If you can follow the money, you're going to get rich, but you're also going to know what's really happening in the world.
You know what? That's also one of the mottos of journalists, follow the money in order to find out what is the real story.
You're exactly
right. But, Mr. Yakunin, I'm sure you have a different view compared to Mr. Rogers,
because
we're talking about civilizations here.
Listen, I'm not talking civilizational attitude, I'm not talking, anything like geopolitics. I am following what you said. That used to be a very proper directive, follow the money. Unfortunately, nowadays, money, that is not the means to facilitate the exchange of the goods, facilitate the exchange of the trade, right? Today, money seems to be upper hand in terms of the pyramid, who is upper hand and who is below. So, to my mind, my humble opinion, I'm not economist, I am not, macroeconomist, but money today, in terms of banking, existing bankings, they are not providing, facilitating the development of real sector, but vice versa. So if you are following monies, we do not have anything to eat.
Mr. Rogers, you have to respond to that very briefly.
Well, I was going to say, banking, your point about banking, if I understood, banking is going to change dramatically. My daughters will never go to a bank. It's all going to disappear. It's going to be over the internet.
All right. And what about that BRICS question that I just posed?
Well, the BRICS is tough because at this point, there's 5 countries, right? 2 out of 5, they are going through some rough period. I mean, to put that mildly, right? So India right now is doing quite well, and the reform is getting momentum. I would say there is a huge room for there's a huge room for improving mutual understanding between China and India, the 2 biggest emerging markets. So I think we may see some progress in Xiamen.
Finally, before we go, 10 seconds for every one of you. Wrap it up for us and shed some light about where we are going at what stage, Mr. Yakunin.
I am positive that, think tank works and the work of the leaders should be directed to consider a reality and to present a new approach for modeling of the future.
Okay, Mr.
Be
Rogers.
worried.
As simple as that.
I have 2 seconds. Be worried. And get prepared. And get prepared.
What about be happy?
Okay.
Well,
what about be happy? Yes. Are you happy with that, Mr. Xu?
I think, finally, China's growth model is gaining some acceptance in emerging market.
Sitao, Chief Economist Partner of Deloitte China. Jim Rogers, world-renowned investor based in Singapore. And Vladimir Yakunin, former Russian Railways CEO and founder of international think tank Dialogue of Civilization. Gentlemen, what a pleasure to have the 3 of you at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum here in Russia.